Hello and welcome to World Talks, where every word matters, with me, Anna Kalczyńska. Good evening. Hungary and Slovakia blocked EU sanctions on Georgian government officials despite a broad majority in favor. Georgia apart, also Syria and Ukraine were part of an impressive agenda of the Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels, with Kaja Kallas premiering as key EU diplomat. And joining me to discuss the EU foreign affairs challenges is Jarosław Pietras, Senior Research Associate, Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies, a leading Polish EU specialist and a long-time diplomat. Good evening, sir. Good to have you here.
Good evening.
All right, so first Foreign Ministers' Council meeting presided by Kaja Kallas, and first call for action, sanctions against members of Georgia's pro-Russian ruling party, given Hungary's opposition and other countries quietly aligning with Budapest. It was easy to guess that EU's unanimity requirement for sanctions has become a strategic liability, as proved today. So my first question goes to you. Shouldn't this process be reformed?
Well, this process from the very beginning has been considered as very difficult, because you have to have everyone agreeing or everyone on board when deciding on such issues. Lisbon Treaty provided for possibility of change using so-called passerelle clause, which would enable, with the agreement of all countries involved, that decisions in some cases, in some areas, like, for example, on some foreign policy areas, could be taken in a qualified majority, not unanimity. However, in order to use this passerelle, you still to have unanimity. So I think here we've got a difficulty, because we have to respect that every member state have got a right to defend his views, and then it becomes a problematic. Kaja Kallas, I think, has been very confidently steering this meeting, and there has been discussion on Georgia, and there has been discussion, for example, on visas to Georgian, and Commission will make a recommendation for that. However, here there are some also questions, because some people say if we will make it very difficult for Georgians to obtain visa, then we will make it more difficult for those pro-democratic forces in Georgia to operate. So I think it's a difficult choice also from this point of view. But obviously, as in many other cases of sanctions, one or two countries generally become very difficult and slow down the process. When you look at the past, one would say it takes much longer, but finally agreement on sanctions is assured with among all countries, including those difficult ones.
All right, so today EU opts to keep talking to Georgia's pro-Russian officials and rulers. As we hear from Alexander Schallenberg, the Austrian Minister for Foreign Affairs, he doesn't want to burn bridges with Georgia. It's not exactly what the Georgian opposition was hoping for, I imagine. But if you could please walk us through the process of decision-making in EU. Why was Mercosur agreement passed, despite France and Poland's voting against? And the sanctions against the government breaking the rules of law cannot be administered according to the same voting mechanism.
The difference relates to issues and areas which are covered by different treaty provisions. Trade issues are competence of the European Union. It means Commission is responsible for proposing, for negotiating, and for bringing to finalization of the agreement. Therefore, when Commission negotiated Mercosur, taking into account opinions of the member states, have proposed that this agreement will be subject to the vote and this vote is done in a qualified majority. So it means that not necessarily all the EU member states have to agree in order to accept this agreement. It differs in relation to foreign affairs issues, because still member states would like to keep foreign affairs as a national competence. And in many cases, they've got a very different interest in different regions of the world. Therefore, they not want to be overvoted, bypassed when deciding on the issues which are vital for them. Let's take, for example, very difficult and very most radical example, which is a question of Cyprus. And Cyprus is still a divided country, has got some particular interest in reunification, whereas this might be related to their policy. For many other member states, it's the views on what could be, for example, European Union relation with Turkey responsible for this, and at least in part for this division, it might be totally different. And Cyprus would not like to be outvoted when it comes to decisions concerning the interest. So there are many national interests which are very strong, and member states prefer to have it under unanimity, because then they are being secure that it will not, in case they've got a problem, they will not be outvoted. Whereas in many other areas where there is a legislation, where there is issues like environment, transport, telecom, or international trade agreements, it's a different procedure and different requirements, and
Yes,
it's everyone agreed that
understand.
it would be qualified majority.
We understand, but that brings us to the question of, for instance, peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, right? Since the discussions of potential EU forces on the ground in Ukraine have surfaced, we now hear from Kaja Kallas, who says too early to talk about peacekeeping mission, as Russia is not interested in peace, but at some point this scenario might become more realistic, right? So do you imagine EU being treated seriously if there will be always one country vetoing such a possibility, such as sending troops to Ukraine? I mean, that really brings a question about effectiveness of EU, right? In terms
yes, you are right. It is a question of effectiveness of the EU, but EU is founded by 27 democracies with member states which have got a different interest. If we start to ignore some of the member states, it might be also a problem. Therefore, it is much better to have to search for unanimity. It takes time. It's much longer. It's not so easy in areas which are conflictual. However, once decided, and we had a number of cases where very difficult issues were decided. When we are coming to a military security, that's a very new issue for the European Union, because there has not been so strongly developed even instruments in this area. You know, sending European troops, you should have earlier have much bigger clarity about cooperation on these issues. Obviously, countries may agree, and it's not necessarily in such area which goes beyond competences of the EU, that all the countries should be sending these troops. And therefore, one can imagine that, for example, in this case, because for many European countries, it will be so important to have a presence once the hot war will be stopped, to ensure that the ceasefire or whatever solution will be maintained. Then it might be that it will be not the whole of the EU, but the group of the EU member states realizing this mission. And this also is possibility, and it also gives a certain flexibility to the EU to act internationally. But I repeat, it's a very sensitive politically area. And when you've got 27 member states, it is very difficult to have an easy solution in a very quick manner.
All right. There are many issues to be tackled with, but let's go now to Polish agenda as Poland takes up the presidency of the EU this January. What is exactly the Polish role in the institutional dimension? I mean, what is the agenda is basically known. We know that the security is very on the top of the Polish agenda, but what is exactly Poland to be doing as a leading president of the Council of EU?
Council of the EU is a major decision-making body. It's also a legislative body. It's a co-legislator together with the European Parliament. Therefore, the role of a presidency will be to preside over every meeting that will happen in Brussels during next semester, from January to June, in order to take decisions which will be necessary for various issues. We have been speaking a minute ago about Kaja Kallas and the Foreign Affairs Council. This council has got a permanent president. It's not up to Poland to run this council. However, remaining councils are mostly presided by the rotating presidency, which is precisely the Poland that will take this role in the next semester. It means that meetings like a meeting of the ministers, which is formally council, which takes decisions, will be presided by Poland, and will have an agenda that is somehow steered, which is promoted by the Polish government. Therefore, looking at these security dimensions in various aspects probably will be reflected in decisions that will be taken during this half a year. One has to notice that these decisions are not necessarily proposed by Poland. There will be many things that are already on the table. They are already discussed either with the Commission or with the European Parliament, and simply Poland will take these issues in the hands and will try to find a final solution. But already plenty of elements of the discussion has been held before, and there will be continuation of what was decided before and what Polish could add. However, symbolically and practically, the role of Polish presidency in the council will be quite important. Among other things, because it's a specific period. It is just new commission which starts to work, and therefore Commission will try to propose new things, and Poland can work in a council, could provide kind of a guidance how in the future these elements should be proposed, should be formed, should be discussed in the European Union. Secondly, European Parliament is also just beginning. It has got own internal structure. They started debates. It always takes time at the beginning to run discussions and to come to the conclusions. And during the Polish presidency, probably there will be sufficiently clear view what European Parliament's committees and rapporteurs of different legislative acts would like to achieve. And therefore, negotiations will start in a full sense. The difference between Hungarian semester, Hungarian presidency and Polish presidency is that Hungarians were running the council in a period where there was no clarity on the side of the Commission, because the last Commission was ending, the new Commission has not yet started. And the same with European Parliament, because after elections there is a kind of a slow start of a new Parliament. Poland will have a full swing into the process.
Jarosław Pietras, thank you very much. We're looking forward to Polish taking up the presidency of the European Union very soon, 1st of January. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Jarosław Pietras, Senior Research Associate, Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. And that concludes this edition of World Talks, but please stay tuned to TVP World as more news is coming next.